The whisper began millennia ago, carried by the warm winds of the Sahara. There was a time when the throne of power belonged not to kings, but to queens. A matriarchal lineage, shrouded in gold and iron, ruled a vast empire in the heart of Africa. But history, written by the victors, attempted to silence their name, tearing apart the most glorious chapter of female sovereignty. This is the revelation of the Candaces, the Cantakes of Kush. We will now delve into the sands of Meroë, the city of the iron gods, to discover the sovereigns who defied the arrogance of Rome. One of them, the legendary Amanirenas, blind in one eye, confronted Augustus Caesar himself, and what she did to the pride of the Roman emperor was an act of dominion never recounted in their books. The secret here is not just wealth or war, but ancestral knowledge, proof that political complexity, military mastery, and spiritual wisdom were born and flourished under the Black Crown. Prepare to witness what has been hidden. Its temples still guard the code of a power that the Western world feared and tried to erase. Before we unravel the mystery of their pyramids, if the truth calls to you, subscribe to the channel so that this ancient story reaches more seekers. Leave a like, and tell us in the comments, from which part of the world does this revelation reach you? May the echoes of Kush guide us. Few dared to whisper the truth. There was a time when kings knelt before black queens, sovereigns of a kingdom that extended its shadow across vast portions of the Nile. However, ask the history books, and the name Candace will sound like a distant echo, a forgotten footnote, if that. Why did global narratives rush to bury the legacy of these Cantakes of Kush, whose crowns not only shone with gold, but with the wrought iron that dominated the ancient world? The answer lies in a carefully orchestrated silence, where female and black authority was simply inconceivable to the empires that came after. It is a mystery that transcends archaeology. How could such a powerful kingdom, one that defied even Augustus Caesar, have been so meticulously erased from the annals of military and political glory? The history we have been told is incomplete, a torn map that hides continents of ancestral wisdom and power. We are about to tear away this veil, revealing the lineage of queens who ruled with an iron fist and an indomitable spirit, mistresses of a kingdom that did not submit to Roman hegemony. What does civilization fear more, female power or black power? The journey begins on sands swept by time, where the pyramids of a forgotten kingdom await to tell the true story. When we talk about ancient power on the Nile, everyone only thinks of pharaohs in Egypt, but there is a secret that lies further south, there in Nubia, where the sun rose with a different brilliance. There lay the kingdom of Kush, with its jewel, Meroë, the true hidden heart of Africa, a civilization that flourished for over 1,000 years, rivaling any empire. Imagine a strategic location, bathed by the sacred waters of the Nile, yet protected by the desert and a spirituality that stemmed directly from the origins of humanity. Kush was not just a neighbor of Egypt, it was a cradle of royalty, from which emerged the black pharaohs who ruled Egypt itself, forming the legendary 25th dynasty. Meroë, which became the capital, was the center of everything, a vibrant metropolis, full of life, with the ivory and spice trade running through its veins. There, the architecture blended Egyptian genius with a unique African aesthetic, creating a portal between the physical and spiritual worlds. This ancient kingdom, stretching for thousands of kilometers, possessed seemingly limitless wealth, sustained not only by gold but also by mastery of metallurgy, having mastered iron long before many other peoples. What few people know is that this wealth was not only material, but also stemmed from a treasure trove of ancestral knowledge. This power and wisdom culminated in a governmental structure that was the envy of the patriarchs, for the throne was guarded and occupied by queens. Who would have thought that the grand history of global power was written by female hands? To understand the power of these women, we need to decipher the title they carried. Candace. It wasn't a given name, you know? It was more than that. It was a mantle of authority, a sacred title of royalty, which in the Meroitic language sounded like Kentake. The word Kentake didn't just mean queen, but something much deeper, something closer to Queen Mother or powerful woman, linking the leader to the feminine principle of creation and sovereignty, like a living goddess on earth. Think of the ancestral strength of the mother who nurtures and, at the same time, protects with claws. This title was the key to the throne in Meroë, because it indicated that power came from a matriarchal lineage, where succession could pass from mother to daughter, or from aunt to nephew, but always mediated by the central female figure. It was a reversal of power, where women dictated the rules of the game. The mere use of the term Candace was already a political and spiritual act, showing that they were the guardians of the kingdom's stability and knowledge, with emerging religious and military power. They not only governed men, they guided them and appointed them to high positions. The power of this title was so great that it spread throughout the ancient world, even being mentioned by the Romans and in biblical texts, although often out of context. What does this sacred name conceal about the true essence of African royalty? In the Kushite worldview, the idea that royal power emanated from the feminine was not a modern political choice, but an ancestral truth stemming from the very beginning of everything. It was believed that the right to govern did not come from brute force, but from the capacity to generate, nurture, and maintain order, qualities intrinsically linked to the female figure. This means that the Candaces were not merely consorts or reigning queens. They were the living manifestation of the mother goddess, the primordial source from which divine authority flowed for the kingdom. They were seen as intermediaries between the gods and the people, responsible for the fertility of the land and for prosperity. Indeed, in many ancient depictions, the Candaces appear side by side with their husbands or children, but always with the larger crown, or in a prominent position, brandishing spears or performing religious rituals. This demonstrates that their spiritual and military authority was unquestionable, even superior to that of the king. The very ceremony of ascension to the throne was laden with this feminine symbolism. The new Candace was invested with sacred garments and jewels, in a ritual that celebrated the rebirth of ancestral sovereignty, reaffirming that power did not die, but only transformed through a new woman. This matriarchal structure, rare in the ancient world, was the secret to Kush's longevity. But what happens when this queen mother, imbued with divine power, must confront the most powerful empire on earth, one that only understood patriarchal strength? If Meroë was the heart of Kush, it pulsed with the rhythm of iron and faith, a surprising combination by the standards of antiquity. Imagine a place where spirituality was not just prayer, but blended with the technology that forged the region's destiny, giving the Kushites a military and commercial advantage. Meroë was, in fact, the Birmingham of ancient Africa, full of furnaces that burned day and night, producing high-quality iron tools and weapons, a secret that few civilizations had mastered with such efficiency. Iron was the black gold of the time, and Meroë controlled it. Amidst this industrial smoke, temples and more than 200 pyramids rose up, smaller and steeper than the Egyptian ones, but with an architecture that pointed towards the sky in a unique way. They were not just tombs, they were portals of ascension for the Candaces and kings, linking royalty to the stars and ancestors. Faith there was dominated by the imposing figure of Epidmak, the lion god, a fierce and powerful deity, symbol of war, fertility, and the protection of the kingdom. The Candaces were frequently associated with Epidmak, showing that his power was not only political but also brutally divine. This mixture of iron, faith, and female royalty made Meroë a legendary, almost mythical city that few foreigners dared to visit without permission. But Meroë's power would be tested when the greatest empire in the Mediterranean, obsessed with gold and power, decided to march south. We have reached a crucial moment in history, when the power of Kush collided head-on with the inexhaustible ambition of Rome, and at the center of this storm was she, the legendary Candace Amanirenas. Imagine the scene: on one side, the organized might of Augustus Caesar, on the other, an indomitable Kushite queen. Amanirenas was not only a brilliant strategist, she was a figure of physical strength, described by the Romans as possessing a robust body and, most notably, being blind in one eye. This scar, however, was not a sign of weakness. It was the mark of a warrior who had faced danger head-on, making her even more feared. The conflict began over taxes and Roman interference in trade routes, but soon escalated into full-blown war, with Kush launching an attack, something unthinkable for any kingdom neighboring Rome. Amanirenas led her troops personally, demonstrating that female leadership was military, not merely ceremonial. What followed was an intense military campaign, where the Meroitic forces, surprisingly well-equipped with iron from Meroë, invaded Roman Egypt and caused significant damage to the Roman garrisons. The bravery of this Black Queen echoed through Caesar's camps as a warning. But the conflict was far from over, and the ancient world was not ready for what would happen next, an act that would transcend war and become an eternal symbol of resistance against the oppressor. The war between Candace Amanirenas and Rome reached its climax with a daring, almost sacrilegious act that reverberated throughout the Mediterranean, leaving Rome in a state of shock. The Kushites, led by the Queen, invaded the city of Syene, modern-day Aswan, a vital point in Roman Egypt. They weren't there merely to fight. The objective was symbolic. Kushites' troops marched toward a colossal bronze statue of Augustus Caesar himself, the most powerful emperor in the world, and looted it. This wasn't just theft, it was a profound political and spiritual insult. The masterstroke was when they cut off the head of Caesar's statue and took it back to Meroë as a macabre war trophy. Think of the impact of that. The head of the divine emperor, carried off by a black queen whom he had underestimated. But what they did with this sacred and profane artifact reveals Kushite wisdom. They buried the bronze head under the steps of a temple dedicated to victory, so that everyone who entered the house of their god had to step on the face of the Roman emperor. This gesture not only humiliated Caesar, but also served as a ritual of spiritual domination. They transformed the symbol of Rome into an eternal doormat, ensuring that the power of the empire would always be under the feet of Kush. This secret, however, would be revealed many centuries later. After years of conflict and Amanirenas' audacity in looting Caesar's head, what was expected was a full-blown retaliation from Rome, but what happened was one of the most unusual peace agreements of antiquity. The Black Queen, blind and warlike, forced the greatest empire to negotiate on her terms. The negotiations were not easy, but Candace demonstrated a cool political intelligence, knowing when to fight and when to use her prestige. She sent her emissaries to Samos, where Augustus Caesar was, and achieved the unthinkable, a treaty that not only ended hostilities but was highly favorable to Kush. The agreement ensured the removal of Roman troops from a vital border area, establishing a limit of influence that Rome swore not to cross. More importantly, the kingdom of Meroë was exempted from any tribute or tax to Rome. A subtle but profound humiliation for imperial pride. This peace treaty, signed around 2120 BC, guaranteed Kush's sovereignty for another 300 years, a feat few kingdoms achieved when facing Roman wrath. It was a victory of intelligence and strategy, proving that Candace's power was greater than brute force. Indeed, the Black Queen not only fought, she won both the war and the diplomacy against Caesar, ensuring that her kingdom continued to flourish, bathed in gold and secrets, while the rest of the world bowed to Rome. As we enter the silence of the Candace tombs, such as that of Amanirenas, we find more than treasures. We discover a complex visual code that narrates the history of female dominance. Their gold was not merely wealth, it was the divine light that radiated royal power. Meroitic jewelry was breathtaking, massive, and detailed, adorned with amulets that combined Egyptian influences with purely Kushite symbols, such as the falcon and the lion god Apidmak. Each necklace, bracelet, and ring was a manifesto of authority and spiritual protection. In many depictions on the walls of temples and pyramids, the Candaces are portrayed on a gigantic scale, towering over men, wearing opulent ceremonial attire, and carrying spears or battle axes. This iconography leaves no doubt about their direct military power. What is most fascinating is the use of the crown. They didn't just wear the pharaoh's crown, but added complex adornments, often with a double uraeus, the sacred serpent, indicating dominion over the upper and lower Nile, as well as a direct link to the goddess Mut. These artifacts, now scattered throughout museums around the world, are material proof that power in Kush had a female and black face. a truth that official history has attempted to diminish, transforming female sovereigns into mere unknown queens. But what do these symbols conceal about biblical knowledge? There is a mysterious echo connecting the power of these black queens with humanity's most sacred texts, a link that the history of Meroë makes impossible to ignore. After all, the Bible and other ancient texts mention queens from the south who ruled regions of opulence and wisdom. Candace is directly mentioned in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, where it speaks of the Ethiopian eunuch, a high-ranking official in the court of Candace, Queen of the Ethiopians. This subtle but direct mention proves that the title was recognized and revered even in early Christianity. But the secret is even older. The legendary figure of the Queen of Sheba, or Makeda, who visited King Solomon, is widely associated with the Ethiopian royal lineage. Many scholars suggest that she may have been a precursor or a mythical figure who solidified the matriarchal tradition that would culminate in the Candaces. This connection suggests that the royalty of Kush and Meroë possessed esoteric knowledge and legendary wealth that directly influenced the narratives and faith of the peoples of the Levant. The wisdom that Solomon sought may have been guarded under the crown of a black woman from the south. What is undeniable is that Candace was no unknown figure. She was a recognized force in ancient geopolitics and spirituality, a central piece in the mosaic of religious history that was conveniently minimized in the following centuries. What was the best-kept secret in her tombs? Before Meroë became the center of the Candaces, Kushite power resided in Napata, a city that held the deepest mysteries of the civilization, especially in its royal necropolises. What was discovered there challenged the notion that power existed only north of the Nile. Imagine an opulence that rivaled, and perhaps surpassed, that of the Egyptian pharaohs. The tombs of Napata revealed incredible treasures, coffins of pure silver, solid gold jewelry inlaid with precious stones, and ceremonial artifacts of breathtaking beauty, all crafted with unparalleled mastery. These findings are not merely proof of material wealth. They demonstrate cultural sophistication and a complex belief system, with the presence of statuettes of Kushite and Egyptian deities indicating a profound spiritual fusion. It was a capital that radiated power and knowledge. The most intriguing aspect, however, is the inscriptions. In the temples and tombs, there were texts that narrated military campaigns, sacred rituals, and the lineage of kings and, of course, queens. But many of these secrets are written in a language that still challenges the world's greatest linguists. This treasure from Napata, now dispersed, is a window into a golden age of ancient Africa, an era of black kings who ascended the throne of Egypt. It reminds us that the story we learn about the Nile is only half the legend. If Kush was a center of power, it was sustained by a sophisticated written knowledge that, ironically, has been almost entirely silenced by history. We are talking about Meroitic writing, the language spoken and written by the scribes in the service of the Candaces. Imagine a writing system that combined Egyptian hieroglyphs with cursive letters, used to record everything from commercial transactions to sacred rituals and the glorious royal lineage. This writing is engraved on stele and papyri, but it holds a profound secret. The problem is that, although linguists can pronounce the letters and decipher the sounds, the exact meaning of many words still eludes us. It's like having the code, but not the key to unlock the ancient message. The Meroitic texts contain the cosmology, laws, and songs of praise to the queens, representing the direct voice of the Candaces for posterity. They narrate a world of gods, kings, and the intimate connection between royalty and divinity. This language barrier keeps Kushite wisdom shrouded in mystery, preventing us from fully understanding the spiritual depth and political complexity that flourished under the tutelage of these powerful queens. What would these unread texts tell us about the gods? When exploring the spirituality of the Candaces, we realize that there was a goddess who was revered with special fervor, Isis. Although associated with Egypt, her cult in Kush was just as, or even more, powerful, showing that faith knew no geographical boundaries. For the black queens of Meroë, Isis was not only the mother goddess, protector and magical figure, but the personification of feminine wisdom, royalty, and the continuity of life. Her temple in Philae, in the south, was a point of pilgrimage and of great Meroitic influence. The Candaces saw themselves as direct daughters of Isis, heirs to her magical power and unwavering sovereignty. This identification reinforced matriarchal legitimacy, linking the throne to a universally respected and powerful deity. What is most fascinating is that the cult of Isis spread throughout the ancient world, reaching Rome and beyond, but was preserved in its purest and most powerful form in Meroë long after it had been suppressed in other regions. This demonstrates Kush's role as guardian of ancestral traditions. This devotion to Isis, the Queen of Heaven, is not merely a religious detail. It is the key to understanding how African spirituality spread, influencing the beliefs of other cultures and keeping alive the power of the feminine principle. If you look at the pyramids of Meroë, you will not only see piles of stone, you will see a star map etched into the earth, revealing a knowledge of astronomy and esotericism that is pure ancestral wisdom. The city was an observatory, designed to harmonize the sky with royal power. The temples and tombs were not built haphazardly. They were carefully aligned with certain celestial points, following solar cycles and the rising of important stars, showing that the architects of Kush understood the language of the cosmos. This cosmic architecture reinforced the idea that the power of the Candaces was not earthly, but came directly from the stars, linking royalty to the great mysteries of the universe. It was a constant reminder that the laws of the kingdom reflected divine order. It's intriguing to think that, while other peoples merely observed the sky, the Kushites incorporated it into their sacred landscape, transforming the city itself into an ongoing ritual. This suggests a philosophical and mathematical depth that we are still trying to decipher. This connection to the cosmos is a silent secret, for the structures, though worn by time, still point to forgotten truths about the origin and source of authority of these powerful queens. No empire lasts forever, and Kush, despite its spiritual and military strength, also succumbed to time. However, its fall was not a sudden disaster, but a slow and melancholy silence, which helped official history erase it from the books of glory. The shift in trade routes was a fatal blow. With Nile trade declining and new sea routes gaining strength, the gold, iron, and spices of Meroë began to flow elsewhere, diminishing the economic power that sustained the kingdom. Furthermore, external pressures increased. A new kingdom, Aksum, to the south, began to gain strength and would eventually invade Kush, dismantling the empire around the 4th century AD. It was the end of an era, but not the end of the legacy. The saddest thing is that, with the fall, Meroë became a ghost town, swallowed by the sands and oblivion. The lack of political continuity and the inaccessibility of the region ensured that the world looked to Egypt and completely ignored what was further south. This profound silence is no accident. The disappearance of Meroë allowed Eurocentric narratives to solidify, minimizing the influence and history of a black civilization that, for millennia, was a beacon of power and knowledge. For many centuries, Meroë and the Candaces were merely myths to the outside world, until modern archaeology, often with questionable intentions, began to unearth the truth beneath the sand. The rescue of this lost identity, however, came at a price. In the 19th century, European explorers, such as the Italian Giuseppe Ferlini, arrived in Meroë, not in search of knowledge, but obsessed with the legend of Candace's gold. Ferlini looted the pyramids, dynamiting some of them in his frantic search for treasure. He found what he was looking for in the tomb of Candace Amanishakito, pure gold jewelry, bracelets, rings, and necklaces, a treasure so vast that he took it to Europe, where it was sold and dispersed among museums and private collections. A colossal theft of ancestral heritage. Although this looting revealed the opulence of Meroë, it also caused irreparable damage, destroying historical contexts and the chance to fully decipher the meaning of funerary rituals. The mystery remained, but the proof of wealth was irrefutable. Thus, the legacy of the Candaces was, in a sense, doubly stolen. First by history which ignored them, and then by the explorers who looted them. But the surviving artifacts speak for themselves, calling for a reassessment of their true place in time. One of the greatest crimes in history was not only the forgetting of Kush, but the intentional distortion of the figure of the Candaces. Western narrative has always had difficulty accepting the idea of a powerful, black civilization governed by women. These queens were often downplayed in ancient accounts, described as exotic figures or strange exceptions in a world dominated by patriarchs. This ignored the truth. Female rule was the norm, not the anomaly, in Kush for centuries. The iconography in the pyramids, where the Candaces are depicted in battle, plump and imposing, was sometimes used to disqualify them, instead of recognizing that excess weight was, in Kushite culture, a symbol of health, fertility, and therefore, power. This minimization helped solidify a worldview where Africa was seen as a continent without a complex history or great leaders. The silence surrounding Meroë is not innocent. It served to justify the narrative of European superiority that would follow. Therefore, reclaiming the history of the Candaces is more than just recounting a fact. It is dismantling a historical lie that attempted to erase the evidence that female and black power, wisdom, and authority existed at the height of antiquity. Although the civilization of Meroë faded away, the seed of its wisdom and royalty was not lost. It transformed and profoundly influenced the spiritual traditions that flourished afterward, especially in Ethiopia. The early acceptance of Christianity in the region did not erase reverence for the ancient Kushite royalty. On the contrary, the figure of Candace was incorporated, being seen as a bridge between ancient African glory and the new faith, a symbol of sovereignty that persisted. The concept of divine royalty, of leaders anointed with unwavering spiritual power, resonated in Ethiopian traditions, which pride themselves on a royal lineage that traces back to the Queen of Sheba, closely linked to the legacy of the Candaces. In the African diaspora and in movements to reclaim ancestral heritage, Candace emerges as a powerful icon of female strength, resistance against empire, and of an Africa that was a center of power and knowledge, not merely a periphery. Thus, the power of Meroë transcended the ruins. It became a silent force, an inspiration for those seeking to reconnect with a history of glory, proving that African royalty and ancestral wisdom continue to live on in various forms of faith and identity. The legacy of the Candaces is not a tale of defeat. It is living proof that resistance and sovereignty can triumph over brute force and oblivion. They represent a beacon of female and African power that refused to be silenced. Imagine the moral and military strength required to negotiate on equal footing and win against the Roman Empire at the height of its power. The Candaces ensured that Kush remained an autonomous and respected kingdom for centuries, a rarity in ancient history. They are irrefutable proof that political complexity, mastery of metallurgy, and cultural dominance were not exclusive to the Mediterranean or Europe. They rewrite the map of ancient power, placing Africa in its rightful place. At the center, the voice of the Candaces was not silenced. It merely awaited the right moment, beneath the sands, to be rediscovered. This story is a call to revere the complete history, the one that includes the warrior women and the civilizations that were masters in their own era. What remains for us is to reflect. If history has hidden such powerful queens, what other deep secrets and mysteries still lie beneath the veil of time, waiting to change our worldview? To encounter the story of the Candaces of Kush is to be confronted with a powerful truth, that female power, cultural richness, and ancestral African authority are facts, not myths. The influence of these queens still shines brightly in today's world. Their sovereignty and resilience have become an archetype for millions, inspiring empowerment movements, the reclaiming of Black identity, and the fight against narratives that attempt to diminish Africa. They are proof that history has a forgotten side that needs to be honored. This revelation demands that we look at history not as a closed book, but as a scroll being unrolled now. The legacy of Kush teaches us that wisdom and strength come from where we least expect them, often from places that have been purposefully marginalized. The invitation is to recognize that the ancient knowledge of these civilizations still resonates in our spirituality, art, and even in how we understand leadership. They left an indelible mark on the tapestry of humanity. The Black Queen who ruled the ancient world is, in fact, alive in the hearts of those who seek the truth behind the silence, forcing us to ask, if this was hidden, what else were we prevented from knowing about our own origins? We conclude this journey, but the echo of the Candaces of Kush will never be silenced. What we have uncovered today is not merely a historical fact, but a prophecy whispered by time. The power, wisdom, and strength of black women were at the heart of one of the greatest civilizations of antiquity. Look at the ruins of Meroë, and you will see not only stone and sand. You will see eternal resistance, irrefutable proof that Africa was and always will be a beacon of sovereignty and knowledge. May the audacity of Amanirenas and the wisdom of her sisters resonate within you, inspiring respect and reverence for a past they tried to bury. The silence has been broken, but many secrets still lie dormant beneath the sands of time. New civilizations, new gods, and new African mysteries await revelation. To continue this quest for ancestral truth and ensure that no legend is forgotten, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Together, we will unearth the hidden wisdom that rewrites the history of humanity. Until the next revelation.